Book 2, welcome to Jackie's Living Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for my second update of August. So, I was waiting to do this update because I wanted to get all of my thrift books order, and the last book hadn't come yet. So, I'm gonna open it for you guys on camera, but I did film yesterday. I filmed the tag, Shelley Swearigan's worth every page book tag, her tag on Mammoths, that she thinks are worth it. And so I was able to film something. And which is also surprising because it stormed yesterday. And it stormed again early this morning. And basically all morning. And now it's sunny again, but it's also muggy. Which kind of sucks. But at least I'm off from work. I don't have to, do the carts in this heat. But I'm working tomorrow, so I'm gonna have to be probably out in the heat. Or have to deal with the rain again, because a customer did say to me that it's probably gonna rain all week. So there's a good chance it will rain again tomorrow. But of course, I am taking my book, the third and final book from my third book horror is finally here, so I can film that haul my update and my haul for you guys. Because I also bought a couple other books as well at Books A Million. So first, let me update you guys. So I'm kind of I'm still reading Fire and Blood, but both Jacob and Alyssa finished it, which I am not surprised because they were listening to it on audiobook. And I was reading it physically, and if you've seen George R. R. Martin's Fire and Blood, it's a chunky book. So, I figured they'd get done before me. And the last chapter I read, I'm guessing is what's going to be in the season that they're filming right now. Season 3. So I end up, So I kind of know, so I have an idea of what's going on in season 3 right now. I basically have an idea of what the plot of season 3, although there's probably going to be some differences. Because, like I said before, I remember hearing that the show, and I think it was George R. R. Martin who said it, that the show is basically what really happened, while the book Fire and Blood is speculation from the maester who wrote the book. Which I still think is really cool. But it's really hard to talk about it because unless you watch the show, it's, I don't know how much I could say. Not that it's a book in a series, but it's a little different than just a standalone book because it is still part of the series. And there's a lot of, and it might be confusing and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so I'm not going to so that's all I'm going to say about Fire and Blood. And I'm also not reading it right now. And in fact, I asked if Jacob specifically was done reading. And, when he said yes, I was like, good, because now I can be a little more relaxed about my reading and I can take a break from it if I want to. And there's no pressure, so. And Larissa knows I'm one of those people who's fond of reading multiple books at the same time. Which she actually said, jokingly, that I've got her into doing that as well. Which, she is doing what she means. And so, currently, other than that, I am still reading this delightful book, The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, which this one has more of a detective feel than The Woman in White did. There's an actual, in the beginning, the first half of the book, the first narrative in the book, you're with the detective. So, the story starts off with our first narrator, Better Edge. The detective isn't the narrator, but Better Edge is our narrator. He is the butler of the Verinda family, and he is recalling the events of how the Moonstone came into the family's lives and how it went missing. We get he explains the history of the Moonstone and how it's an Indian diamond, and this Englishman stole the diamond and brought it back to England with him. And he was warned that it's cursed, and he will be damned. And he tries to give the diamond as a birthday gift to his niece, but he doesn't have the best relationship with his sister. So he doesn't, on her birthday, he doesn't get a chance to give it to her. He doesn't even get to go to the birthday. In fact, he dies. And so he gives it to whom I'm assuming is his son, Franklin Blake. And he's able to bring it to, he's invited to the party, and he brings it to his cousin, whom, by the way, he is in love with and wants to marry. But she has two suitors that are both her cousins, Franklin Blake and Godfrey. I don't remember his last name. Godfrey. So that's kind of a subplot. And she's all excited, really so pleased to have this beautiful jewel. And her mom is wants kind of, is hesitant about and wants to know where she's going to keep the diamond. And she's very dismissive of that idea. And she's like, why is that such a big deal? Why is that important? It's just, who's going to steal it in our own house? And lo and behold, it's found missing. It has disappeared from her, and is discovered by Better Edge's daughter, Penelope. She's the one who realized it has gone missing. So the mom decides to hire a detective, a Sergeant Seagrave. And in fact, Seagrave essentially, he tells the servants when he gets there, he's going to search them because he thinks that one of them might be the culprit, one of them might have stolen the diamond. And he searches, and they still don't find it. And meanwhile, Franklin Blake thinks this guy's an ass. Doesn't think he's a very good detective. So he decides to bring his father, the detective that his father often hires, a Sergeant Cuff, onto the scene. And Better Edge actually has very mixed feelings about Cuff. He kind of respects and admires him and thinks he's doing a good job as a shop, but at the same time, he really doesn't like him because Cuff immediately starts, first of all, he criticizes the other detective, points out what he did wrong, and he also, so there is a servant in their household, a maid in their household, a Rosanna Spearman, who has a past as a thief, a history as a thief, and she was in a reformatory. So Better Edge and Penelope and Lady Verinda have taken her in. They feel sorry for her. They think she's turned a new leaf, and they think she's redeemed herself. But they also don't want Detective Cuff to find out about her past because, of course, he'll automatically think she's guilty. Or will at least be suspicious of her. And, of course, that's what happens. So that's the first strike against him. The second strike, and the worst strike he makes, is that he ends up suspecting, he thinks that maybe the diamond has been stolen, but Rachel might have stolen her own diamond and hid it somewhere. Because Sergeant Cuff insists on, he tells the people at the household he's going to search everybody in the house, because one of the mistakes he thinks that Sergeant Seagrave made was letting the servants know he's going to search them specifically, because it has made them nervous and they might, panic or hide evidence if one of them is guilty. So he says he's going to search everybody, and Rachel, who's already acting weird and very short with people, has insisted that she won't let him search her. And he had a feeling that would be the case. And he senses her hostility. In fact, she's very hostile to Franklin Blake, because, and says, oh, he's not going to help you. Don't trust him. And in fact, it looked like she was going to marry him, that she was going to pick him between the two cousins, and that they were in love, and Penelope assumed they were in love and everything, but then the next one, she's very hostile, and both Penelope, Better Edge, and her mom, and Mr. Blake himself are completely caught off guard by her hostility. So so again, that's, it leaves the Sergeant Cup to think that she might be guilty. And Betteridge, who has has known Rachel since she's a little girl and even loves her in a way, and loves her as she were his own, is very hostile toward Sergeant Cuffed. He's kind of angry that, he's accusing Rachel. And of course, her mom has come to her defense, like, oh, she would never do that. And, even I found myself siding with Sergeant Cuff now, though I'm not so sure. I think that maybe her mom and Betteridge are right and that Rachel might be innocent. As far as what I've read, because I've gotten I'm in the second part of the second half of the story where we get narrative of other characters, and we even get a little bit of Rachel's perspective. We don't get her narrative. I don't think her narrative is involved in the story. I mean, it might be, because I've only gotten to like narrative 3 or 4 I'm on, and I think there's 8 narratives, so we might get her perspective directly, but where like we are with her a little bit, as long as these other characters are with her. So, it makes me a little now uncertain that maybe potentially that Cuff could be wrong. That maybe so the second part of the story, like with the Woman in White, we're with a different narrator in the second half of the story. Where in fact we're with several different narrators. It's again like we're getting a record of events and so we're getting different people's records of not the whole party, but the rest of the events after the party. And what's gonna happen, if they're gonna discover the diamond, like did Rachel maybe hide it, or maybe they keep talking about that someone keeps suggesting that they should cut up the diamond so that the Indian people can't come and take it back. In fact, there are these 3 Indians who show up disguised as jugglers, and this little Indian boy who can do like tricks and stuff, intending to steal the diamond back. And in fact, right away, Franklin thinks that they're the culprits, because it comes from their country, and that's what they were spying. Which, by the way, so there's a little bit of that. So in case just a warning, there's a little bit of potential racism against the Indian culture. But yeah, this is really a really interesting story, and I was wondering because there was so much more for me to read. So how are we going to get to the resolution? Like, what other stuff was going to happen? Because I was so sure that Rachel was guilty, and then eventually she would reveal herself. But now, like I said, I'm not so sure. Maybe Sergeant Cuff was wrong about Rachel. I don't completely trust her, and I think she's a very complicated woman, and is not easily won over. I do think there's something going on between her and Franklin Blake, that there are feelings between those two. Like, definitely, I know that her and Godfrey, they're just cousins. I mean, maybe not on his end, but on her end, she just sees him as, you're very sweet, and you're my cousin, and I love you in a family kind of way, but I'm not in love with you. Again, this cover still bothers me, because this cover just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't know why they're using this painting on the cover of the Moonstone. Like, this more fits the Woman in White. Like, I could see this being the Woman in White or something, even though she's not actually wearing. The only thing that might be white is her bonnet. Remember, she's wearing it on top of her head. You guys can see it. But yeah, this to me feels more like the Woman in White than it does the Moonstone. But as I've always said before, I never understood some of the cover choices for some of these classic books. But anyway, so I'm almost done when I gotta, actually, some of this is actually more notes and stuff, some of this, so in appendices, like the book officially ends on the story ends on page 457. The rest of that chunk is, appendices and notes. And I'm currently on page 287, so I'm almost in the 300 page mark. So I might read a little bit tonight. We will see what happens after dinner if I'll read a little bit more, because I'm actually trying to focus on some other shorter works, which are these two, which are To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, a classic, and it's seen as a feminist classic, actually. And then the first book in Mistborn Era 2, The Alloy of Law. I finally have read more of it than just a prologue in the first chapter. Like, I'm in the middle of chapter 6, I think. And this has a very different rhythm than the first Mistborn series. This one kind of has a more fast-paced quality to it because it's inspired by Western, but it's like more, but it takes place in a city, so it's not like, it's not the traditional, like, small town with only a few buildings and in the middle of nowhere, and the OK Corral kind of, it's still like a town. So Alloy of Law, you have Wax and Wayne are two main characters. Waximilium he was from a rich family, but when he was a lawman, and he had gone to this old town that had a lot of, out in the rough areas, and, was trying, rough and tumble stuff, and he had a group of, fellow lawmen, including Wayne, one of his partners, and, like, after I think it was his uncle, who, I guess he was the heir for his uncle's for his uncle, so when his uncle died, he was forced to come back and take his uncle's place as heir and run the family estate. And he has tried to, he's like, I'm now a nobleman now, but he can't seem to completely shake it. And then something happens where he's pulled back into the fray and realizes that he doesn't want to entirely let it go his old life. So it's in the Mistborn era, so in this, and there are people that he is a allomancer, a coin shot, I think, and but he can do more than just coin. I think there's two things, so because he's what known as twin-born, so he can do two things with his allomancy, and I think so can Wayne as well. And he has noticed that there are these people known as I cannot remember what they're called. Let me see. It doesn't sound the back. But these people that vanishers, that's what they call them, vanishers. They have been staging robberies amongst the rich people that live in the city, like robbing trains. They even rob a theater, and then they will kidnap, which seems random women, but then it turns out, like, Wax figures out that the reason these women that they might be kidnapping might actually be allomancers, but they're trying to hide their abilities. And so he's trying to decide if he should get involved or not. And then he goes to, with his new fiance, because he has to get a wife. So he and his new fiance and her husband and her father and her cousin decide, they go to a wedding as a, way to show that they're engaged, that him and his fiance are engaged and everything. And their wedding gets attacked because these vanishers won't go after where there are crowds of these rich people, and they show up. In fact, his fiance and her cousin get kidnapped. So Wax and Wayne shows up in disguise, and he and Wax have to fight these vanishers. And Wax recognizes the voice of one of the leaders of this group of vanishers. And that's the last thing I read. I took a break. I'm like, so that's why I'm not sure if I want to read the Moonstone, because I might want to read some of, get to chapter 10 of this book. I mean, I guess I could read it in bed before I go to sleep, or I could read that one before I go to sleep. I mean, it might be better with this one because it's more, like, if it's a slow-going novel, if it's a slower novel like the Moonstone is, then I think I'm known to, fall asleep a lot quicker. Not that it's boring, but, if it's a slower novel, I'm going to be... I can't explain it because I don't want to, like I said, it's not that it's boring, it's just a slower novel, I'll fall asleep a lot quicker. If that makes sense. With a more fast-paced novel, I might get a little bit more read before I officially fall asleep. Which is why this next book I also probably might not be able to read in bed, and that is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This is a classic, and a lot of people consider this a feminine classic. In fact, Virginia Woolf even wrote an essay called A Room of One's Own, which is basically a woman should have a room of her own, especially a writer. And so this one, there's really not much of a plot. It's just basically the Ramsay family is at their vacation home in the Scottish coastline, and their interactions with their neighbors and friends, and how their neighbors respond to them, how a lot of them are in love with this family, especially wanting part of it, especially a lot of them love Miss Ramsay and think she's a wonderful woman, and a lot of these people are kind of infatuated with her. Particularly this woman who is a painter, and she's really kind of having a artist block, and she's like struggling on her current painting. So I guess the closest to a plot you're gonna get is that the youngest son, James, desperately wants to go to the lighthouse, which refers to the object of the title refers to, but he keeps getting told that they can't go, and he's kind of like, and there's kind of the relationship between Mr. and Miss Ramsay is a little like rough right now. In fact, she's charming and sweet and caring, and while he's very cantankerous and just, he's kind of the one who keeps saying, we can't go to the lighthouse, like what's the big deal about this lighthouse, and he's very snappish. And I want to say at one point they mentioned he had, but I think that might have, she was saying he was like a Cancer. Like, there are times when she's really hostile towards him, but then there are times where she says, I do really love him. And he's very interesting because he's very much he's a writer, and he's worried about being remembered. If people will people read my books? And he compares himself to these famous authors that people might not read anymore. And he's very much wants to be able to talk to someone about literature and, you know, Shakespeare and all that. And there's actually another friend of theirs, an acquaintance of theirs, a Mr. Charles Tansley, who's also very much an intellectual, and he's very well read, but he doesn't think very highly of women and having in their skills. Like he says to the woman who is a painter, I can't Bristol, I cannot remember her name, but I just know that they constantly mention that she's Chinese, or that she has Chinese eyes. But he tells her that women can't write or paint. And that, of course, really bothers her, which it would bother me too. It kind of pissed me off if someone told me that I wasn't capable of creating art, and like only men can do that. So he's not a very likable person. In fact, I think both him, in fact, I think both him and Mr. Ramsey are not very likable. Although later, you kind of pity Mr. Ramsey, I think, particularly later on, like in the section that I'm reading right now. But it is divided into two sections. You have the first section, which is called The Window, where you meet the family and they're going about their day, and they are preparing for, Miss Ramsey is preparing for a dinner where she's going to invite all their friends over for a meal. And you have James, who's just waiting there, wanting to go to the lighthouse really badly. We do get a little bit of information on their kids. Like you have one son, I don't know if it's Andrew or another, or I don't know if it's Andrew, but one of the sons likes to go hunting, and Miss Ramsey does just not get why he likes killing animals, essentially. And Prue is another one, and they, like, later on in another section of the story, we do find out what happens to her and Andrew as well. Jasper is the one that likes hunting. And like I said, James just wants to go to the lighthouse. So the first part is meeting the family, and then there's another part in the middle where it's talking about, like, time has passed and showing what happens to the family over the years. And it's, I don't know how I feel about it, because there are times it took me a little bit to get into it, because yes, it is confusing, because it is stream of consciousness, and transitioning to other characters is very confusing. You almost don't know who's speaking at first, but I've kind of gotten into the rhythm of it all, and I think it helped that I read it during a time when it was quiet and I could concentrate on it. It's also not long. It's not super long, although there are a lot of people who feel like it took them forever to read it because of the writing style. And some people just couldn't get into it, and and it works for me just fine. Like, I don't know if I'll keep it once I'm done reading it, and I do think my sister has a copy of it. Might have a copy of it. I'll have to double check next time I go to her house. But I don't know if I'll read this again once I'm done reading it. And I might try Orlando or Miss Dalloway. We will see. I don't know. I'll see how I feel if I ever get inspired to pick up one of those. And there's her famous essay, A Room of One's Own. Maybe I'll read it. I don't know. But, I mean, there is a list of all her works. But those are the most famous ones. So, I don't know. I mean, I can't really recommend it because it's just like, I don't know if I feel like it's not everybody's cup of tea. And, it's not like and I wouldn't say it's, only feminists would like it. Like, I don't like that, to assume that only women that are feminist would like this book. I mean, yeah, it probably targets more female audiences, But I think there are, maybe there are men that could. Because I don't know. But I don't like the whole idea of, oh, this is only a book that feminists would read. And also, what is wrong with that anyway? Like, nothing. And the only, and I was thinking about this because I was reading, because I figure this book probably has a lot of very strongly worded negative reviews of people that didn't like it. And I was reading, and it wasn't even the review itself it was actually a comment on the review of a person that didn't like it. And one person had said, one person said only feminists would like this book. And that kind of annoyed me, which I probably shouldn't have read that review in the first place. Because I wasn't sure if I was going to keep going or not. I was having a little slither of hesitancy about this book. But obviously I've kept going. And I thought it could potentially be interesting to see what the negative reviews said, because sometimes I think negative reviews can be very entertaining. Especially if it's a book that you're not strongly in love with and everything, I think it's the best book ever, and you can read a negative review and be cool with it and not let it bother you. Like, you don't care so much about the book that you're going to get mad. And it wasn't even that people don't like this book, because I kind of suspect there were people that wouldn't like it. But it's just the fact that this commenter on this one particular review was like, oh, only feminists like it. Like, that's a bad thing. And maybe because I know people that are feminist, especially the early stages, the early, years of feminism, I think people mean the more aggressive, anti-men feminism, like men suck, all men are terrible, and because those that are the women that are very aggressive and will be in your face, and like, I don't like that kind of feminism either. I don't want someone to, tell me how to be more feminist, how to be a woman, like, I want to like what I like, I want to do what I do, and think how I feel, and I'm not going to turn against the men in my life. But anyway, so yeah, so enough serious talk, enough of that. Now let's get to the book haul. Okay, first, first let me show you. Okay, no, actually, I'll start with the opening. Let me see if I can open this without the scissors. Okay, so it looks like I might be able to open this without the scissors. Okay. Yes. Okay, good. Oh, wait. This way? Okay. Okay, that's the ads. Okay, so let me show you this first book, since it doesn't have any connection to the other two books. So this is Paragon, our arm is true when each... sorry, so I was reading the little quote on the back. This is the third and final book in the Raven King trilogy, which is... I've been trying to use thrift books as a way to get the books in a series or a trilogy, particularly where I've only seen the first book, and it says, like, I might be able to see it at the Outpost bookshop, but it's slim. I mean, while at Books A Million, I will see the first book, but maybe not the other books in the series. Or, you'll see one of the recent releases from the series or the trilogy, but not necessarily the previous two. And so I've been using thrift books to get the books from those older, and it's like a lot of times it's older series. So this is, like I said, the Raven King trilogy, which is a Robin Hood retelling. And I've already read the first book, Hood, so I'm going to read Scarlet soon, and now I have an excuse because I have all 3 books in the trilogy. Just as I have all 3 books in the Under the Northern Sky trilogy, so I can read all that as well, all 3 of those books, thankfully. And the same thing with this series as well. I also have all the books in it, so I don't have an excuse. So, which is partly why I picked that one, and it also looks like it's not that long, so. But I liked the first book. I had a good time with it. I will be reading, like I said, I'll be reading Scarlet soon. Maybe at the end of August, I'll start reading it and take it into September. I did wait until spring to read Hood. I figured it'd be a good spring book. But I decided to, but you know what? I feel like I shouldn't save a book just for a season. I feel like I should read it as soon as I get it, not procrastinate it too long just because I'm waiting for a season to read it. Because then the more I wait, then I'll eventually get sidetracked and end up not reading it. So that's the last book is Tuck, which I'm guessing centers around because we did get introduced to the character that is the Friar Tuck character in Hood. But in Hood, he has a smaller role in that book. He kind of he's there in the beginning, and then he disappears in the middle of the story, and then going into the last half of the story of the first book, he appears again. So then these next 2 books are both nonfictions, which I wasn't sure if this one was a nonfiction or not, but. Well, first, I guess I should show you this one first. So, so as I told you, I'm kind of getting very much into the Plantagenets and the Tudors. And so I'm slowly accumulating books on both dynasties. And this is about Richard III from the Plantagenet era, and Jennifer Brooks, who sadly we passed away earlier or was it this year or in 2024? No, I think it was this year, back in the beginning of this year, back in like January or February. She was very much a fangirl of Richard III. In fact, she is the one who kind of introduced me to Richard III in this whole history, indirectly, because she did a video where she talked about, in one of her videos, she mentioned not just that she was a fan, but also that she was the one who brought up that in world news that they had discovered where his body was, where his bones were found, and it was in a parking lot. And I always thought that was really cool. And she's always talking about Richard III and some of the things he's done and everything, and he is, I think, the grandson. I think he might be related to. I'll find out when I read the book. But I would assume he would be the grandson, or maybe the great-grandson of the first Richard the Lionheart, which for some reason I was thinking Richard III and Richard the Lionheart were the same person, but no, the Richard I is Richard the Lionheart. But yeah, I was so excited to read. This is the book I was most excited for, but of course it's the one that came last. But I'm just so excited to read this biography. And now, according to A.L. Rouse, is the best biography of Richard III. I don't know if this is the biography, because the algorithm showed me a channel of one of those history channels on YouTube where he gave you a list. He shows you different lists of books you can read on on the Plantagenet history. And the cover looked similar to this one that he showed, a biography of Richard III, but I don't think it was the same book. But yeah, I am so excited to read this, and it's so much. This project has been so much fun so far, learning this history, this medieval history. And I started watching the Tudor series, as you guys know, and I finally watched some episodes again because I had decided to watch the documentary on King Henry VIII first before I got back to watching the show. You know, because of course a lot of people say these historical fiction shows and movies and books aren't completely accurate. Like, of course, because these screenwriters take liberties and will make it even more dramatic or like a soap opera. So I decided, let me watch this before I continue watching the Tudors. Let me just watch this documentary on the guy, and it was very interesting, and I would like to read a biography of him at some point. He seems like a very intriguing character. Very, I can see people having him being a very polarizing person. But, I mean, he's the king, so you can't say no to the king, or you can't be brutally honest and tell him he's an ass. Because he could... And almost all of his wives, that's what happened. They all got their heads cut off. Because he wanted to divorce him. So... And, like I said, because of Jennifer Brooks, I decided to start with him. And I'm excited, and in a way, my reading of this will be in a way to honor her, because I was one of her millions of subscribers. I loved her channel, watched it every time she put up a new video. I was always excited, and, I gave Moby Dick a shot because of her. It ended up not working for me. I mean, I did read most of it, but then I couldn't do it anymore. But yeah, so in a way, that's kind of what made me consider doing, wanting to do reading books that are inspired by booktubers. Because, I mean, especially because also, the Steve Donahue and Shelley Swearengans videos on historical fiction books that they recommend, that also kind of inspired it. So, this, like I said, this is the one I'm most excited to read. But I also have my last books order, the books from that, particularly the biography on Zelda Fitzgerald. I gotta read that one, by Sally Klein. And then the final book, and I decided to save this one for last, because this is The Princess in the Tower, which I was not sure if this was fiction or non-fiction, because I've known Alison Weirs. She is the author of... Oh, okay, I'll get that in a minute. She is the author of this series, which is her take on Henry's 6 wives. Just like Philippa Gregory, she does a book on each of the wives, each of the women that he married. But anyway, so I know that, but I also, that she was a historian, so this could have been one or the other, but I also figured, how could you write a story? I wasn't sure how you would go about writing a story about this specific thing, which is the Prince of the Tower. And I also showed it last because it has to do with Richard. These are his nephews that he probably locked up in the tower, and we don't know what happened to them, if he was the one who killed them or if he had someone else do it. Because I'm guessing something happened. He had them killed, obviously. So it's really, the speculation is he didn't. And actually, Steve Donahue, in one of his historical fiction videos of historical fiction books he would recommend, I think he did mention this particular thing and how people still speculate about it. It's one of those mysteries of the past, of the medieval mystery people are just so obsessed with. But Yeah, that's the other thing. I don't want to read this until I read this biography first. So those are my 3 thrift books purchases. So we have okay, let me show you the last 2 books. We're also kind of, again, the same topic. Now, I normally do not buy nonfiction off of at Books A Million, but I make exception with these 2 books. Okay, well, I'll just keep them because I'm gonna do show all the books. Dan Jones's books, both on the Plantagenets and the War of the Roses. Which, this one, when I first saw the cover of this one, I was assuming it was the Con Egugan, I still don't know how to say his last name, book where he wrote a fictional series on the War of the Roses, in historical fiction, and I saw this title and I assumed it was the series, but no, it's Dan Jones's book on the whole history of that. But yeah, he wrote a series, Connie Guggen wrote a whole historical fiction series about that whole history. And he's actually the same guy who wrote that book on Julius Caesar, a whole fictional series about Julius Caesar, which I ended up letting go. But I kind of wish I hadn't. I wish I'd given it another shot and continued with the series, because I'm sure it was a really great historical fiction series. But, this, a lot of people recommend, and both the woman at Books A Million, because I've made friends with the women that work at Books A Million, most of them, not all of them, but most of the girls that work there. And one of them, when I went there, not yesterday, but a couple days ago, I guess on Sunday, probably, I think that's when I went the first time, when I got this book. She recommended to get this one first, because, I asked her if she was familiar with this time period, and I was not sure if I should start with this one or War of the Roses. And I actually had and I kind of figured, thinking about it, I figured, this probably is the one I should start with. But I wanted to double check. And there was another option. There was a third option, actually. There was it was like something like The Secrets of the Tudors or something, like all the juicy gossip about the Tudors and all that. So, but I decided, let me get these first, and then maybe someday I'll get that one, or I'll ask for that one for Christmas. But I should have, I don't know if, I might have a picture, because what I've been doing is when I go to Books A Million, I take pictures of books that I might be interested in the future. And then I look for it on Goodreads and Storygraph, and then on Amazon as well. So these are both, okay. So, and these are both nonfiction, and I'm sure you can guess what they're about by the title. Well, I guess I can read the back. But there's only one book here that I can't really read the back of it, because it's a third book in a trilogy. But let me read the backs of these books, which I don't think I have not read the backs of any of them. So, the first Plantagenet kings inherited a blood-soaked realm from the Northerns, and transformed it into an empire that stretched at its peak from Scotland to Jerusalem. In this epic narrative, history of courage, treachery, and ambition and deception, Dan Jones resurrects the unruly royal dynasty that preceded the Tudors. They produced England's best and worst kings. Henry II and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine, twice a queen and the most famous woman in Christendom. Their son Richard the Lionheart, who fought Saladin in the Third Crusade, and his conniving brother King John. Okay, so Robin Hood, that's when Robin Hood is set originally. Like this Raven King, it's a retelling of Robin Hood, but it's not. They decided to set it a different time period. But okay, and so yeah, and that's who, because in the Disney, the animated Robin Hood, they have all the, which it's really funny that they have all the characters are animals. And Prince John, or King John, and his brother Richard are literal lions. And then King John does come back. Does come back at the end of the movie. Spoiler if you haven't seen that one. Who fought Saladin in the Third Crusade, and his conniving brother King John, who was forced to grant his people new rights under the Magna Carta, the basis for our own Bill of Rights. Which, actually, here's another thing about that. Like, I don't know, it might have been something that Jennifer Brooks talked about in one of her last videos, but yeah, I think it was. She talked about, or actually, no, it might have been a different video. It might have been someone else, a different YouTuber who talked about how it was kind of funny that they mentioned the Crusades, and they implied the reason why Prince John's brother Richard was gone was because that Sir his Prince John's right-hand man, or snake in this case, had hypnotized him on this mission to go to do this crazy crusade. So I don't know if it was Jennifer Brooks who in one of her last videos or someone else talked about that in Robin Hood the animated movie, and they thought it was actually kind of funny that that's what they implied. Oh yeah, it wasn't Jennifer Brooks. I think it was someone who was like, it was one of those, because I think it was a voiceover. It was these two people talking about the movie in a voiceover where they showed clips and they would talk about the movie over the clip. So it was kind of a commentary on the movie. And they talked about how it was kind of funny that they said that, that's their interpretation. That's how they. Okay. Combining the latest academic research with a gift for storytelling, Jones vividly recreates the great battles of Bannockburn, Crecy, Sluys, and reveals how the malign kings Edward II and Richard II met their downfalls. This is the era of chivalry and the Black Death, and the Knights Templar, the founding of the Parliament in the 100 Years' War, when England's national identity was forged by the sword. So that sounds cool. And people always talk about how the best nonfiction is often like it reads like a story. And that's what I look for in my nonfiction. Sometimes it could still come off as a little dry, where, like, for instance, I know that a lot of people say David McCullough is a little dry, and I could see that. Okay, so this is the War of the Roses. The crown of England changed hands 8 times over the course of the 15th century as two warring branches of the Plantagenet dynasty fought to the death of the right to rule. In this riveting follow-up to the Plantagenets, Dan Jones describes why the longest reigning British royal family tore itself apart in brutal blood feud and finally succumbed to the upstart Tudors. Some of the greatest heroes and villains of history were thrown together in these turbulent times, from Joan of Arc, who stopped at nothing in her determination to defend France, to Richard III, who murdered his own nephews. Oh, okay, so he was around during the Richard III was around during the War of the Roses. So I guess it ends with Richard II, and then Richard III comes in during the War of the Roses. Murders in desperate bid to secure his stolen crown. Treachery and intrigue ruled the land, while Warwick the Kingmaker and Edward IV rounded up armies and sent those who betrayed them to the scaffold. Catherine Valois, Margaret of Anjou, and the beautiful twice-married Elizabeth of Woodville secretly schemed to secure the throne for their prodigy. Sorry, I don't know how to say that word. With an unforgettable description of the Battle of Bosworth, where the last Plantagenet king was slain. Yep. Okay, so he's Richard III. That's right. Because he's Henry VII. Historically, I think he beat Richard III. Where the last Plantagenet king was slain. This is bold, dramatic narrative history for fans of Game of Thrones and the White Queen. And that's the other thing. That's why I was always interested in this. But it took me a while to finally, be inspired to get books on it, because I had remember hearing that song that George R. R. Martin based Song of Ice and Fire off this history. Or that was one of his inspirations. Like, you have the Lannisters and the Starks. They're like the Yorks and the Lancasters. Okay, so let me read the backs of these. Like I said, I can't read the back of this one because it will spoil the first book. It's a fun series, and especially if you like Robin Hood, which I have mixed feelings about Robin Hood. Like, it might have just been the one I read was, but although, no, it's probably not, because, it's very episodic, and I imagine that translations are, but I still like it. I just, kind of like the animated Disney movie, and the one with, and the live action with Kevin Costner, which I know that one's people in Men in Tights. I also like that one too. I know that the Kevin Costner one, and people kind of make fun of that one because Kevin Costner doesn't even speak with an English accent. I mean, even in Robin Hood Men in Tights, they make fun of that. But I still kind of like it, because I think Kevin Costner's a good actor. So I still have fun with it. And I like some of the other people in it. Okay, so now we have... Okay, so let's see. Is there a... there might not be a description, because I know sometimes biographies have description, summaries for what it's going to cover. But... not always. And you can tell this is a used book because, well, the spine's not necessarily broken, or it doesn't look like it's broken, but this is very flimsy. Okay, but and it's yellow. Okay, so here's the thing about the author. Okay, so let me see if there's anything. Okay, so there's really no, description of what it's going to cover. I mean, it's a biography, so I guess you can't really do, a summary of a description of what it's about, but some biographies I think do. Okay, so I'm just going to read all the blurbs. So, the C.V. Wedgwood, I don't know who that is. I'm guessing he's a writer of some kind, or, but it's this or maybe he's an historian. Like, it's either writers or historians will review biographies. Okay, so bustling, vivid, exuberant biography may discourage further argument about who murdered the princess. I mean, even though I haven't read a biography on him and don't know, I don't really know a lot about Richard III. I kind of suspected that he did. I mean, I didn't know there was, like, a question if he did but, if anything, the only thing that's possible is that he hired someone to do it. Then again, I guess he might not have wanted them murdered, he might have just wanted them banished. But anyway, let me finish. Sorry, I keep getting sidetracked. Argument about who murdered the princess. Mr. Kendall has drawn a plausible, human, and convincing picture of Richard III and has told an exciting story with infectious enthusiasm and dramatic skill. Which I like. Sometimes I think nonfiction blurbs are a little bit more nuanced. Well, a lot of times, like, blurbs of, genre fiction is often, this is great, this is the best thing ever, or it's the next, whatever. They're not creative. But sometimes I think nonfiction can be, especially because nonfiction is about specific things. A fine accomplishment of splendid, encompassing biography. It brings a period brilliant to light and belatedly offers an understanding of one of the most misunderstood figures of English history, a landmark. the Christian Science Monitor. And I think this, actually, our very own Steve Donahue, I think he was a reviewer on the Christian Science Monitor. But I don't know if that's I guess it's a magazine? I think that's a magazine. Kendall writes well, with the result that when the sun goes down at Bosworth Field, the reader is full of wrath of the treacherous Stanleys and the calculating Northumberland. That's from New York Times. Highly recommended, The New Yorker. Okay, that one's kind of boring. Here, as nearly as patience, scholarship, and intelligence surmise can achieve it, is a definitive biography of Richard III. It is a noteworthy performance. Saturday Review. Which, again, with definitive, I need to look that up again, what exactly the definition of definitive is, because there are so many biographies on some of these historical figures that, like, it's like you don't know which, if any of them are really completely accurate. And I want to say definitive biographies are the ones that are the closest. But I don't know. But this one says it's a definitive biography. Or does it? And it's noteworthy. Okay, so then we have here, based on fresh evidence and untainted by stale Tudor legends, Richard Kendall portrays, is as far as one can tell, the Richard England knew when he rode to London to begin governing for his nephews. Oh, so he was, which I don't think is the first time that has happened in history, where someone who was trying to take the throne was trying to make sure that they had the heir under their thumb. Okay, so this last, that was the New York Herald Tribune book review. So this last one is Times Literary Supplement, London. This book, based throughout on original authorities, combines sound scholarship with literary distinction. The author has a keen sense of background, and his description of the 15th century world are always stimulating and sometimes beautiful. Okay, so he died in the 70s, the author Paul Murray Kendall. Okay, so he is the author of Warwick the Kingmaker, which I think Warwick is mentioned in... Warwick is mentioned... Yeah, okay, so he is mentioned in the War of the Roses book, which makes sense that he's mentioned in the, that this author who wrote this biography on Richard III also wrote a biography on this person, Warwick the Kingmaker, the Yorkist Age. So I guess that's about the York family, the York dynasty. King Louis the 11th. In the Art of Biography, which that'd be interesting to read. Actually, I think I've heard of that one before. I heard someone like Steve Donahue mentioning the Art of Biography. But yeah, so, and then the last book that I can show you, because you guys know there's one more book, but I can't tell you, read the back of it because will spoil. Okay, so this is the Alison Weir book, The Princess of the Tower, in the Tower. So despite 5 centuries of investigation by historians, the sinister deaths of boy King Edward V and his younger brother Richard, Duke of York, remain 2 of the most fascinating murder mysteries in English history. Did Richard III really kill the princess in the Tower, as is commonly believed, or was the murderer someone else entirely? Carefully examining every shred of contemporary evidence, as well as dozens of modern accounts, Alison Weir reconstructs the entire chain of events leading to the double murder. We are witnesses to the rivalry, ambition, intrigue, and struggle for power that culminated in the imprisonment of the princess and the hushed-up murders that secured Richard's claim to the throne as Richard III, a masterpiece of historical research and riveting story of the conspiracy and deception of the princess in the tower at last provides a solution to the age-old puzzle. Which, yeah, so the only thing to think of is either if he didn't do it, maybe he hired someone, or he didn't know that someone was going to kill his nephews. That's the only thing I think of him not doing it. Of course, this is going by me not knowing much about Richard III and what he might be capable of. So, but, obviously, I know a little, you can get kind of a base idea of how these guys would have worked in medieval times. I'm still listening to, while my podcast and everything, I'm having fun with that. I'm currently in the Rest is History. I'm on the episodes where they're talking about the Medici family, particularly Lorenzo the Magnificent. And his whole history and everything. Like, their previous episode in season 1, I guess they talked about his father and grandfather, I'm guessing. That's the only thing that, because I'm not watching the show from the beginning. I'm just picking random episodes. So there's stuff that, of course, I will have missed from season 1 by then. But yeah, I am so excited, having all these books to get into this topic of, English history. And it's going to be so much fun. Just such a fun deep dive. Okay. Okay, so that is my update for you guys. I hope you guys are doing well, enjoying your reading. Have any of you read this history before? Are you even interested in this history? Or what is a topic in history if you are interested in? Maybe you're not even into history topics, but what is a subject in history that you're interested in? I would be curious if there's a particular topic in history that fascinates you and that you constantly want to read about. I would love to know what that is, or maybe you just don't care about history at all. It's just not your thing. So I hope you are enjoying your reading and enjoying this update, and I will talk to you all later. All right, bye.